In order to solve a Punnett square, let's review some basic vocabulary. First, a trait is a characteristic that can be passed from one generation to another. Suppose we have these imaginary sea creatures whose skin is usually yellow in color, but every now and then a green-skinned sea creature will be born. In this case, an example of a trait is the skin color. An allele is a different form of the same trait. Having a different skin color would be an example of an allele. Alleles are described as either dominant or recessive, depending on their associated traits. A genotype describes the genetic composition of an individual. It is the description of the alleles for a particular gene, such as skin color. A phenotype is the physical trait or characteristic that can be seen on the individual. When solving a Punnett square, keep the following in mind. A dominant allele plus a dominant allele equals a dominant phenotype. In our case, yellow skin color if yellow is dominant. And this would be homozygous dominant because both alleles are the same. A dominant allele plus a recessive allele equals a dominant phenotype. In our case, yellow skin color, but the individual is a carrier for the green skin color. And this is heterozygous because the individual has two different types of alleles and can pass either of these alleles to the offspring. A recessive allele plus a recessive allele equals a recessive phenotype. In our case, green skin color if green is recessive. And this would be homozygous. The individual will pass the recessive allele for green skin color to its offspring. A dominant trait is always written with a capital letter. Y, capital Y, represents dominant yellow skin color. A recessive trait is always written with a lowercase letter. For simplicity, we will use the lowercase g to represent the recessive green skin color. Let's briefly discuss generations. P generation refers to the primary parental generation, which are purebred yellow or green parents. F generation refers to the first filial generation. Filial indicates a son or a daughter. These would be the offspring of the P generation. F2 generation refers to the second filial generation. These would be the offspring of the F1 generation, and they are also the grandchildren of the P generation. Let's use our imaginary yellow sea creatures to illustrate a Punnett square for an F2 generation cross. That is, YG for both parents with yellow skin as dominant, with a genotype of capital Y, and green skin as recessive using the lowercase g for the genotype. We want to see what the chances are of the yellow or the green skin color trait will appear when an F1 generation has offspring. The steps for setting up a Punnett square are as follows. First, draw the Punnett square. Write the genotype of the parents on the top and on the side of the Punnett square. Since both of our parents are heterozygous for yellow skin, we will write Y and G as shown. Then fill in the boxes accordingly. Looking at the first row, parent number 1 with allele Y and parent number 2 with the same allele Y, we put YY in this first square. Parent number 1 with allele G and parent number 2 with allele Y, we put YG in the second square. Okay, let's move on to the second row. Parent number 1 with allele Y and parent number 2 with allele G, we put YG in this third square. And finally, parent number 1 with allele G and parent number 2 with allele G, we put GG in this fourth square. Determine the percentages of phenotypes, which is the physical expression of the trait. We have 1 square out of the 4 squares with the genotype of YY. This means that 1/4 or 25% of the offspring will display the dominant homozygous phenotype for yellow skin color. We have 2 out of 4 squares with the genotype of YG. This means that 1/2 or 50% of the offspring will display the dominant phenotype of yellow skin color, but are heterozygous since they carry the green allele. And finally, we have 1 square out of the 4 squares with the genotype GG. This means that 1/4 or 25% of the offspring will display the recessive phenotype, the green skin color.